I mean, today almost everyone is racing or trying to put AI agents into production, but the fact is, most of them fail quietly. They hallucinate. I am a heavy user. I know that. They loop, they make confident, but most of the time wrong decisions based on incomplete context. And your traditional observability stack has no idea what's actually happening. The fact is, missing piece isn't the model. These models are very powerful. They can do everything right. The problem is the system of context around it. If they don't know the context, they don't know the context, and that's when things start going wrong. Today we have with us Andre Elizondo, Mezmo's Director of Innovation, who is here to talk about Aura and how it addresses this problem. Andre, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First of all, let's talk about Aura because before this we started recording, I was trying to understand what it is. It's an open source project that you folks use internally, and then you put it out for everyone to use. First of all, let's talk about what is the problem where AI fails. As you know, I mentioned most of the time it is context. So, what is the problem? And what problem is Aura trying to fix? And then we'll talk about open source, market, and everything else. But let's talk about the problem area here.
Yeah, great point. And what you mentioned, Swapnil, is agents fail quietly, right? And that's a problem that everybody has when building agents, pushing them out into production. And when you look at SRE use cases, typically those are on the tail end of the complexity curve, right? You have to make sure that they're very reliable. You have to make sure that they're going to do the right thing every single time. And so what we saw in the industry and our own experiences from this as well is that there's a big lift between taking an open source agent framework, something that's just like a bunch of Lego blocks, and saying, hey, I want to build an SRE agent on this. And so where Aura comes from is we wanted to really short circuit people's experience to get to the end of the curve and do that in a way that was easy and really familiar for the folks that we built Aura for, right? It's all config file driven. It's very similar to deploying a Kubernetes manifest. But really it came from our own learnings, our own internal AI RCA that we have baked into Mezmo that we utilize in production for all of our customers. And we wanted to really just advance the community, advance the industry forward, and make sure that was open and Apache 2 license, something that anybody could use, anybody could build on. Mezmo really is focused on giving those agents the best possible context needed, where Aura can really just sit as a standalone project that has its own ecosystem that really enables you to build those AI SRE agents, again, without having to learn the last 3 years of agent development.
Now, if you look at this space, it's a crowded space. A lot of folks are already doing, but most of those projects are proprietary. Talk a bit about what was your driver behind making it open source? Is it to kind of get an edge over other players? Is it also because open source democratizes thing, and then later on, of course, you can always commercialize it because sometimes folks do want to commercialize. That's the whole you can say engine behind open source. Without commercialization, open source will fail. So talk a bit about the reason behind open sourcing it.
We went down this journey of kind of thinking of what's the best possible way to advance the community forward. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of different products and solutions in the space right now, either baked into existing observability solutions or baked, standalone startups that are just focused on, taking a bunch of data, making sense of it, and then executing workflows on it. And what we believe is that piece really needs to be open. And we wanted to really disrupt that idea of, those sitting always behind a paywall, always sitting behind a vendor's API. Again, similar to kind of what Kubernetes did for standardizing how we run containers in production today. We really believe that there needed to be an open standard, an open solution that, any SRE team could trust. They had transparency baked in from the beginning. They could own the services that they're putting in production. And in order to do that, right, as an SRE who is responsible for an SRE agent who is taking taking some work off your plate and investigating issues for you, accomplishing tasks for you. You need to really be able to trust that agent, and you need to be able to really have the right level of transparency where you understand what that agent is doing so that you can feel confident utilizing it and trusting its output and understanding how it came to a conclusion. And so in order to accomplish all these different tasks, we really do believe that open source is the best possible way to do this. One, because, it really helps to reset the ecosystem a little bit to really focus on open source as the way that we do this as an entire industry. But then also to share our practices, make them apparent, share our learnings with the rest of the industry.
And is Aura for everyone, of course, open source, but can people get benefit from it if they're not Mezmo customers?
That's a great question, and we considered this from the very beginning. It really comes back to, we believe Aura should stand on its own, and what that means is, whether or not you're plugging in Mezmo, for us, we plug in through the MCP interface. So anything with an MCP server, we can tie into Aura, and those tools are automatically discovered. They're automatically instrumented to the agents. And so that could be our MCP server that's served through Mezmo, but you definitely don't need to use Mezmo in order to utilize Aura. You can tie it into your favorite observability solution, the solution you're using today, your incident management solution, et cetera. And Aura is still just as effective. You just may burn a little bit more tokens because you're not engineering that context behind the scenes where Mezmo is really focused. But at the end of the day, you can still get to 100% of your workflows utilizing Mezmo or not.
Let's talk about the architecture of Aura. You folks describe it as an agentic harness with planning, execution, synthesizing, evaluation of loops. How does that actually prevent the cascading failures, context corruption, leaks, drift, a lot of these problems that SRE teams or any other person who deals with agent sees that in production?
This really comes back to part of the open source aspect of this, but also something that we believe is that the harness itself should be batteries included, right? That's why we're really leaning into the concept of an agent harness and not just calling it an agent framework, because we believe that with Aura, you can start with a simple 50-line config file. That config file gives the agent everything it possibly needs in order to accomplish its task. Everything behind the scenes as far as how you orchestrate its memory, how you kind of tune its reasoning cycles and stuff like that. We ship with same defaults, and so you can definitely utilize the defaults that are out of the box for how those different tasks are executed. But you have full control, like I said, through that simple config where I can customize how the agent is going to maybe plan a little bit longer, reason a little bit longer, utilize its tools to get to an end state, like a little bit more than it would have by default. But to the point that you just made there, Swapnil, the planning loop that's baked in from the beginning is really part of the secret sauce of Aura. That's really what differentiates it from a lot of the other harnesses, frameworks out there. Not just the fact that it has batteries included, but the fact that those batteries are really built in a way that you could put those batteries in the most possible, the highest scale, the most kind of critical situations, and those are going to function with a very high level of certainty as it accomplishes its task. So there's things like self-correction built in, where as the agent is, first off planning, understanding, hey, what's the task that's in front of me, whether that's an ad hoc question from your team, maybe that's a reactive task, like, hey, there's a monitor that just happened, or it's a proactive task, like, hey, I want you to go and continually look at incidents unfolding and make sure my runbooks are updated. Any one of these different tasks or different categories, they all benefit from this reasoning loop, in that the agent will first plan, understand what it's doing. It'll execute any kind of tools. It'll synthesize the outputs. So that's where it kind of makes sure that it can really like collect its thoughts. And then it'll self-evaluate. And so there's actually checks built into the system where if the agent isn't fully confident in the reasoning that it got to, or that the tools, didn't give it the full output of like what it needed to see in order to feel comfortable about what the next task should be, It'll continue to basically prompt a reasoning loop. It'll kind of go back to a replanning phase and say, hey, maybe I don't have the full picture. Maybe I don't feel super comfortable about this outcome. Let me go, and just like how you would as an SRE, as a person, you'd say, hey, let me go and like recheck my thinking, see what else is available to me, see what other tools I can call. And so, like I said, this is really part of the batteries included aspect of Aura, where that loop and utilizing that loop in very simple workflows as well as complex workflows, it has a benefit across the board to ensure that you get very reliable outcomes out of your agents. What we really wanted to avoid was, the scenario where I'm sure everybody's had it, where you're using Claude and you get the scenario where it's like, hey, you did something wrong, and it's like, you're absolutely right? Like with Aura, what we wanted to get to is the point where the agent understands, the agent's evaluating itself, it's correcting itself, it's leaving hints for itself in the future. So if it sees that it did something and that was very well received, or it gave the outcome that it needed, it'll leave memories behind for itself so that it can kind of quickly get to that solution in the next time this happens or something similar happens. And so again, all that is built into the harness, and all that is available to use for the entire community.
If I'm not wrong, Aura is built in Rust, and you support, I think, 5 LLM providers and MCP tool integration. Walk us through how an organization actually deploys this. What does day one look like? Of course, it's open source, so they can do whatever they want to do. You may not even have any idea what they're doing with it, but it's still some classic, kind of examples.
Yeah. So to your point, you can definitely run Aura pretty much anywhere. But we also have kind of recommended paths for how you deploy Aura within a container, within your Kubernetes cluster, standalone on a EC2 instance. So there's a lot of different options, and we really wanted to make sure that those were easy, approachable options for people to go down this path. Like you mentioned with MCP, we support basically anything that has an MCP server, and whether that's returning data that is optimized for the agent or not, the system of Aura will kind of take care of ensuring that won't bloat the context window. It won't cause any kind of like hallucinations or something like that based on like the tool returning too much or not returning the right like formatted output. And so there's a lot of like fail safes built into the system, but the pluggability of Aura was really one thing that also we heavily focused on, because we also didn't want to be a closed ecosystem where you couldn't integrate with Aura, you couldn't build on top of Aura, you couldn't test out Aura with the tools that you're using today, whether those are like, your observability solution, or whether that's an in-house built MCP server or in-house built tool. You can plug in Aura into any one of these different systems. And like I said, Aura will automatically understand what to do with those tools, how to map them to the appropriate agents. So if you're having like a multi-agent system, you can easily define that within Aura. So if you have like, say, a security expert, DBA expert, networking expert, etc., defined as agents, Aura will take care of like, hey, these are the tools available. These are the tools you said these systems need. And so it'll make sure that those are available to the system while giving you the pluggability of just utilizing that standard ecosystem. And we also have a number of other things that we're working on as part of progressing the project forward. And so, the great thing about this being open source is it's a fairly new project, right? We're about a month in of releasing this out into the public. But we're building in public, right? So you can see how we're quickly adding features. We're making releases. You can watch our Docker container and kind of see as we publish new releases, we always publish a new build. And so you can quickly adopt all of the different pieces of Aura, again, with a simple deployment, a simple config, and then get the outcome that you're looking for in, a couple of hours more than a few months, right?
One thing that I noticed that, and I may be wrong, that you folks are not kind of building it as just AI tooling. You're kind of building as distributed systems. You have got horizontal scaling, circuit breakers. Why is that SRE mindset so critical for production AI? And is this approach different from how others are approaching, or this is the standard approach to build the distributed systems, or this is the right approach when it comes to context?
So it's twofold. One, because we wanted to build for our audience, we wanted to build a system that was scalable, like you said, horizontally scalable. I can have multiple different instances. I can have those instances collaborate with each other fairly easily. But also it's a great way for us to share context to just the agents that need it at that moment in time. And so it's a great way to preserve token usage kind of by default there. And so it's partially, us really focusing on our audience as SREs and, platform engineers and folks that are running services in production, or it should just look like another service with the same level of reliability guarantees, the same level of configurability, and the same level of like scalability that you expect from literally any one of your other tools. So that's really where the design philosophy came into play. Is we wanted to make a project, we wanted to make a harness that was familiar to our audience, and something that was kind of self-explanatory, right? Like if you're looking for a config and you look in the config file, you should be able to see like, hey, this is what I can tune about the agent. This is why it's important. I don't have to go and, manage an entire SDLC for every single one of my agents, figure out which framework. I have like 10 different teams. Maybe they're all building on 10 different frameworks. They're all building on like 10 different methods of like a loop or whatever like that. Aura really is focused on standardizing that 80% and standardizing that 80% in a way that you can just focus on the 20% that's relevant to that specific workflow or that specific use case for you, and be able to spread that across your entire team and really be able to build more agents that are more predictably running in production in a way that you would expect a production service to operate.
Now, of course, you folks, of course, specialize in telemetry pipeline, active observability. How does Aura fit into that? How does Aura connect to that side of Mezmo's business? What is the relationship between agent orchestration and, of course, your powerful engine telemetry data?
Yeah. So going back to the genesis of Aura, right? We really saw a need in the market where, I can get to the point where I'm processing a lot of telemetry data. I'm generating insights, right? I'm looking for kind of the needles in the haystack. And, we got to a point initially where we were just publishing those through our MCP server, right? Hey, go build your own agent. Go ahead and just adopt this, go adopt our MCP server as anything else that supports MCP. And really the opportunity that we saw, the kind of pain that we saw in the ecosystem is that getting from that point of an MCP server having the right data for you, and then you being able to utilize that data effectively in a workflow that's meaningful to you, that was still at a point in like where we are with development of that, where it's still a little uncertain for people of like how they get to that end state. And so, to your point, like how you integrate Mezmo with Aura is really just through our standard MCP interface. And those MCP tools are really focused for agent consumption. So like we build Aura and all the tools that we expose through Aura with the intent that like, hey, somebody might use this in Claude Code, somebody might use this in Aura, somebody might use this in any like agent system. But at the end of the day, the downstream customer of that data is an agent. And so that's where, when you look at the philosophy of like how we've built our MCP server and the tools that we expose and how we've built those tools, it's purpose built. It's not just us, slapping an MCP server on top of an API, which is what a lot of people have done just to say that they have an MCP server. And so to integrate that with Aura, super easy, just the standard MCP interface. And those tools are built in a way that Aura and any agent can use them in the best possible way, and get the insights that they need. That's actually like a really key thing to highlight there is that, we really focus on, there's two halves of the equation. There's what we can do to engineer things after the tool call, which is really where Aura comes into play. And that's an open control plane, right? Like you can plug that into anything. But then what do we do to engineer the data or engineer the context behind the tool? And that's really where like Mezmo as a company, Mezmo as a platform, we're really focused there, because at the end of the day, if you have better tools, you have better data, you have better agents as your outcome.
You folks presented Aura at NVIDIA GTC last month. Can you talk about what kind of response, what kind of feedback you received either at the event or after the event? Because before that you ran as beta also. What are people saying about it?
Yeah, I think as far as how the initial reception of the project has been, I think it's a breath of fresh air because again, a lot of these teams are used to seeing an API, seeing a service where, hey, in order to test it out, in order to feel it, I have to go sign up for it. I have to go get security approval to run this in my environment, like all these different steps in order to just see if the thing works for you. And so that's led to a lot of frustration in the market. With Aura, what's great is because it's Apache 2 licensed, because it's open source, you can start with it right away. You can test it out in your laptop. You can test it out in your cloud environment and a dev environment. You can put it into production as soon as you feel like you trust it. And so, the reception so far has been very positive. We're working with a few design partners today to, get to the point where we feel like, hey, we've incorporated the feedback and really what we want to focus on for like who we think our audience is. And that's, really the innovators of SRE, right? The innovators of platform engineering, the folks that are living on the frontier of, how they're building these agents, but really want to focus on standardization, really want to focus on not just reinventing the wheel for every single agent. And that's really where Aura has been a bit of a breath of fresh air for the ecosystem and for the industry so that we can really focus on giving them the best possible tools. Again, going back to the Kubernetes analogy where, hey, we're giving you a platform, we're giving you a runtime, we're giving you kind of all the batteries included in order to make this effective. Now you can just focus on defining the piece that's relevant to that team, that's relevant to your workflow, and do that predictably where you can build, 5 agents, 10 agents, 100 agents, and know that will scale at the end of the day in production.
Thank you. Now, if you look at the future, where do you see this is going? What's on the roadmap for Aura, and how do you see systems of context evolving as more organizations try to move AI agents from demos to actual operational workloads? And if I may also ask, what does it mean for SRE as well?
Yeah, I think when we look at where we are in the cycle here, we're in the early phases of seeing AI SREs really get into production, have meaningful value, prove their ROI. And, I think where the natural curve goes and kind of where we're focused on with developing the ecosystem around Aura, developing the ecosystem around Mezmo is, you're going to start kind of like how we did with the early elevators, right? If you look at the history of elevators, you have, like a human in the loop every single time. You don't really trust the agent, and that's okay. We have native human in the loop workflows kind of built into the system, and we expect that to be how people get started. Is like, hey, you want the agent to get to a certain point, and then you want to hit approve, or you want to kind of interrogate its output, and then you want it to go to the next point or the point after that. And again, like similar to the elevator analogy, you always had somebody, in the elevator pressing the button for you. And then you got comfortable enough to where, you can kind of get to this, there's certain folks calling it like the dark factory analogy, right? Like where you feel so comfortable about the factory and the factory operating effectively and not needing humans there that you just turn off the lights, right? And so I think where this goes in the longer span of things is really enabling those components, enabling the ecosystem where we feel like we have the right pieces in place to enable that dark factory mentality. And I think we have, a little bit to get there, but really where we're focused on this with Aura is like, we want to bring SREs into the fold. Like, I've throughout my career, I've always been focused on folks that have been left behind, right? Whether that was DevOps, whether that was containers, like there's always been this like group of people in any adoption cycle that is always kind of like left behind in a lot of different ways. And there's a great opportunity here for SREs to really jump on, all the great innovation, get a lot of the great outcomes of AI and agents specifically in their workflows. And really what we believe is that the tooling has just been kind of the missing piece, or maybe the piece that isn't as approachable as it should be, to enable those teams, to enable those SREs, to enable those platform engineering teams to really feel confident about moving along with kind of the rest of the shift and really feeling like they can integrate it from day one and trust it from day one. It's a very similar trend that we've seen, vibe coding or agentic engineering going through in the last couple of years where, everybody was used to hitting tab complete from like every single line of code that was generated from GitHub Copilot in the early days. And now we're at a point where, there's entire agent loops that are building features, building functions, building entire applications. And then the human can be really the last mile quality gate, or the thing that is guiding its workflow, defining its workflow along the way. But that's really where we get to a point in the next probably 1 to 2 years, of like where we have the SRE teams of today enabled, we have the SRE teams of tomorrow enabled. The tooling is there, the ecosystem is there, and so they're able to really come along for the ride and really gain the benefits that other areas of the industry are gaining today. And that's again why Aura is a very key piece of our strategy, because we really believe in open source, and open source being the mechanism for getting folks to trust it and adopt it and kind of build on it. And so like that's really where this kind of comes back to that core strategy there.
Andre, thank you so much for joining us and breaking down how Aura is tackling the production reliability challenges that AI agents create. This is a critical problem as more teams move beyond the prototype stage, and as we discussed, most of those fail. This may actually change the equation for them, and most projects will start becoming successful. Thank you so much for all these insights. Thanks for creating open source project Aura, and I look forward to our next discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much.